It was a typical Tuesday in the Delta Quadrant on the Federation starship Voyager. 70,000 light-years from home, the crew had settled into a fragile routine. They were explorers, scientists, and soldiers, bound together by a singular goal: survival. But on stardate 49301.2, that routine was shattered by a discovery that would haunt the crew for years to come. Deep in the bowels of engineering, tucked away in a dimly lit maintenance crawlspace, lay the body of Ensign Frank Darwin. He hadn't died from a warp core malfunction or a hostile alien boarding party. He had been murdered. But as the investigation unfolded, the horror wasn't found in the how, it was found in the why. Or more accurately, the terrifying lack thereof. Today, we dive into one of the most chilling cases in Starfleet history. A case where the monster wasn't hiding in the shadows of a nebula, but in the mind of a quiet, soft-spoken colleague. This is the story of Lon Suder, and the day logic itself went insane. The call came in at 0800 hours. B'Elanna Torres, the ship's chief engineer, made the grim discovery. Ensign Darwin was a well-liked officer, a man with no known enemies, and a clean record. When Lieutenant Tuvok, the ship's Vulcan tactical officer and head of security, arrived on the scene, he approached the investigation with his species trademark detachment. To Tuvok, a crime was simply a puzzle, a series of illogical events that could be solved through deduction. The autopsy revealed that Darwin had been struck with a heavy object. There was no sign of a struggle, suggesting the victim knew his attacker. No unauthorized personnel had been in the area. The killer was one of their own. Tuvok's investigation was surgical. He cross-referenced sensor logs, internal transporters, and the duty roster. Within hours, the evidence pointed to a single individual, crewman Lon Suder. Suder was a former Maquis raider, a guerrilla fighter who had joined the Voyager crew out of necessity. He was a Betazoid, a race known for their telepathic empathy. But Suder was different. He was quiet. He was a loner. And when Tuvok entered his quarters to make the arrest, Suder didn't run. He didn't fight. He simply admitted to the crime. In the history of true crime, we often look for a triangle of guilt. Motive, means, and opportunity. Suder had the means. He had the opportunity, but when Tuvok asked for a motive, the case took a turn into the uncanny. I didn't like the way he looked at me. That was it. No long-standing grudge, no theft of replicator rations, no romantic rivalry. Ensign Darwin had looked at Lon Suder in a way that Suder found unpleasant, so Suder killed him. For Tuvok, this was more than a breach of regulations. It was an affront to the universe. In the Vulcan worldview, everything has a cause. Even violence must have a logical root. But Suder offered nothing. He described the act of murder with the same emotional weight one might use to describe pruning a hedge. Suder confessed that during his time with the Maquis, he had found an outlet for his violent impulses. War had made his pathology useful, but in the structured, peaceful environment of a Starfleet vessel, the pressure had built up. Darwin was simply the person standing there when the dam broke. Captain Janeway was faced with a legal nightmare. They were decades away from the nearest Federation penal colony. They couldn't exile him on a desert planet, and they couldn't keep him in the brig forever. But while the captain weighed the legalities, Tuvok became obsessed with the why. He decided to do something slightly unorthodox and incredibly dangerous. Some might say stupid. He would perform a Vulcan mind meld with the killer. A mind meld is the total sharing of two consciousnesses. For a Vulcan, this is a sacred and disciplined act, but merging with a psychopath is like pouring ink into clear water. Tuvok believed that by entering Suder's mind, he could find the hidden logic the killer was suppressing. He believed his own superior mental discipline would act as a filter. He was wrong. Immediately following the meld, the roles began to reverse. Suder, for the first time in his life, felt that calming influence of Vulcan logic. He became peaceful and almost serene. But Tuvok began to unravel. The violence that lived in Suder had found a new home. Tuvok began to experience flashes of intense rage. He found himself counting the ways he could kill his fellow crew members with his bare hands. During a simulation on the holodeck, Tuvok did the unthinkable. He summoned a holographic version of Neelix, the ship's cheerful cook, and strangled him to death. It wasn't a training exercise, it was a release. The investigator had become the predator. Tuvok recognized the infection and attempted to quarantine himself, but the violence was now part of his neural chemistry. He began to lash out at Captain Janeway, questioning her authority with a venomous primal arrogance. He was no longer a lieutenant, he was a ticking time bomb. Voyager's chief medical officer, the EMH, Emergency Medical Hologram, attempted a radical treatment. He believed that the only way to save Tuvok was to suppress the Vulcan's natural emotional inhibitors, forcing him to face the Suder side of his mind head-on. It was a gamble that nearly ended in tragedy. Tuvok escaped sickbay, his mind a storm of ancient Vulcan bloodlust and Suder's modern psychopathy. He sought out the one person he believed could help him finish the transition, Lon Suder. In a chilling reversal of the typical victim and killer dynamic, Suder, now the calmest man on the ship, pleaded with Tuvok not to kill him. Suder explained that killing him wouldn't satisfy the urge, it would only make it stronger. He knew the path Tuvok was on, and he knew it ended in a void that could never be filled. A second desperate mind meld was performed, intended to reset Tuvok's neural pathways. Tuvok collapsed, his mind unable to reconcile the peaceful killer and the violent monk. Tuvok eventually recovered his discipline, though the scars of the mind meld would remain. He returned to his duties once again, the stoic hand of justice on the ship. But he would never again look at a crime and see only a puzzle. He had seen the abyss, and for a moment, he had called it home. As for Lon Suder, he was sentenced to indefinite confinement in his quarters. He spent his days tending to his plants, a man who had found peace only by breaking the mind of a better man. He would later find a chance at redemption during the Kazon occupation of Voyager, but that's a story for another time. The case of Ensign Darwin serves as a haunting reminder of the fragility of the civilized mind. In the vast lonely stretches of the Delta Quadrant, the greatest threat isn't always the alien on the view screen. Sometimes it's the person standing right behind you, waiting for you to look at them the wrong way. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the darker side of the Final Frontier, hit that like button and subscribe for more case files. Let us know in the comments, was Tuvok right to try and understand the mind of a killer, or was his curiosity a form of arrogance? Let us know. We want to know. Until next time, I've been Albie, and this has been Trek Crime.